sea of red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, another week in the can. We're just after American Thanksgiving, and the Flames still not last place. 3 big games this week. 3 times we saw Devin Cooley in net, which was unexpected. As always, I'm Dan alongside Matt. Matt, if I told you coming into this road trip we would see Cooley in 3 of 3, would you have believed it?
Not really, but with how he played, you have to give all props to him.
Let's go back to the first game of the week that we're previewing. This is the Tampa Bay game. The Calgary Flames are on their road trip right now, going to warmer climates, if you will. And they took on Tampa Bay on the 26th. That was Wednesday, and Devin Cooley did not start this one. Dustin Wolf started, got pulled about 5 minutes into the game, and then Cooley goes in. But the Flames get a big loss here, 5-1 against the Lightning. What were your thoughts on this one?
Well, the Flames really didn't seem to be in it from the start, giving up 2 goals in like the first minute and a bit. And I can't fault Wolf with either of the goals that were given up. You give a point-blank shot to Hagel, that's going in, and the redirection, stuff happens. And it made sense to pull Wolf, and it's one of those, like, the coach needed to send a message to the team to wake up, and literally a minute into the game, it was already out of reach.
Yeah, you could watch the first, period, and know the Flames are not coming back here.
No. And typically the Flames don't do well in Tampa anyway, so it wasn't exactly a shock that they fell. It's just, you don't usually see them giving up 4 goals in the first 10 minutes. But, it is what it is. And, you kind of just have to get back on the train a bit and, try to get back to your fundamentals and kind of write off the second and third periods. But,
right off 2/3 of the game.
Well, in terms of, you're not going to come back, but focus on doing fundamental hockey the right way the rest of the way. And, they managed to play a rather decent second and third period. It wasn't enough, but, that's all you can do in a situation where you kind of get blown out right off the hop.
Then they took a day off, and on Black Friday went to Sunrise, Florida, still in the same state, and took on the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. I was really not all that optimistic about this one after the Tampa Bay game. I don't know how you were feeling. Really surprised to see the Cooley made 37 saves here as he got the start, and the Flames beat the defending champs 5-3.
Yeah, after the first 3 minutes, it's like, oh, we just saw this game, and thought
that's kind of how it
felt,
yeah.
And Yan Kuznetsov stopped the bleeding and
gets his first ever NHL goal, assisted by Blake Coleman.
Yes, and then Weegar got his first of the season on his 53rd shot of the year, and was able to tie it, and then the Flames took the game over at that point, and didn't really look back.
No, and I think, as a complete effort, I think the Flames, you would not, if you would have showed me the 2 games back-to-back, this one and the Tampa game, I would not have thought it was the same team.
No. They actually showed up to play after the first 3 minutes in this one, and like the 2 giveaways right off the hop, leading to the first 2 goals, that was spectacularly bad defensive play by the team, but they were able to dig their way out of the hole that they dug and got the 2 points.
Yeah, it was a fun game to watch for those that got to watch it. It was a 2 p.m. start, so I don't know how many Flames fans were watching this one, but fun game to watch for those that could, and nice to see the Flames being able to battle against a good team. And you and I have talked about this in the past, and we saw this in the next game as well, and we're recording on the 30th, just after the Flames Hurricanes game wraps up. I was surprised that this game went 0-0 after 60.
Yeah. Honestly, in the first 10 minutes, I thought Carolina was going to score on multiple occasions, and Devin Cooley just made a handful of saves that were spectacular, and the Flames didn't really, other than the Coronado hitting the post in the second period, they didn't really have a ton of good scoring chances, I felt, throughout the game, and it was kind of just a low-event, boring game.
It was, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as a fan, not the funnest game to watch, but as a Flames fan, I mean, Dryden Hunt makes his season debut. I don't know that anyone's watching for that, but interesting to see Lomberg got a lineup for, I think, the second time in 2 weeks now, so someone else can get in. And Cooley looked amazing.
Yeah. Frankly, like, this game is a loss in regulation if not for Cooley. He stood on his head on a number of occasions, and I felt like the Hurricanes outchanced the Flames probably like 10 or 12-2 in this game. It just did not feel like the Flames had a lot of ability to break through the Hurricanes' defense in any meaningful way. But it was a great effort by Cooley and nothing you could do on the game winner.
Can you think of a bad Dustin Cooley period this season?
Not really.
He's almost like the Michael Stone of netminders, where he comes in and he's rock solid the way you need him to be, no matter how many games he's sat out.
Yeah, well, and this was how well he was playing in the AHL last year before he got hurt
Until Christmas.
Yeah, so we'll see if and how long this continues, but certainly putting some food for thought on an extension for him as we move forward.
We'll come back and talk about that in a little bit here. But after that week, the Calgary Flames, like we said, see Cooley in net 3 times. They have a pretty good week on the score sheet, and with that, they now sit 22 points, still digging themselves out of a hole. Nashville Predators, the only team below them at 20 points. Vancouver right above them at 23. Buffalo at 24. St. Louis at 25. So a bunch of teams right there that we need to bypass, but after 27 games now, the Flames have 9 wins, 14 losses, and 4 overtime losses for, again, a total of 22 points. This is that magic spot in the season now. They always say American Thanksgiving is when you kind of know if you're in or out, and if you're buyers or sellers. I think at this point, we can say the Flames are out, and they're probably sellers. Fair to say?
Yeah, like they'd have to go on a heck of a run from here until basically the Olympics just to get back into the swing of things fully. And there's not that much runway or room for any real failures between now and then.
Yeah, we won't rehash this, but yeah, there's definitely no way I think that magic happens. I mean, we're seeing a very different Flames team than we saw in October, which is great, and it's nice to see, but there's still a long way to go here. The Flames end November now 7-6-2 on the month and are better than 500. And when we look back at October, I did not think that we'd be better than 500 in November.
No. And
it's like a tale of two teams.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at like at the end of the month, last month with our show, I said that between the Toronto and Ottawa games at the end of the month and through November, that the Flames would, to get back into things, would need to go about 11-6. They ended up going 7-3 if you include those 2 games. So, you know, they fell a little bit short, 5 points, and that 5 points is the difference between being 15th and being tied for 8th. So, you know, it's one of those where this team was close to getting better, but not quite enough that they needed to if they wanted to kind of erase October.
Yeah, still a long way to go to get out of that deficit, and I think when we look back at this season, we're going to say that October is what tanked them.
Yeah, because, like, realistically, with the 13 games next month, like, the minimum that they can do is 9-4 just to get back into the swing of things. And, like, that's a tall ask for any team. let alone a team that's 31st.
Yeah. No, for sure. Couple questions I want to ask you. First off, we've seen him play as a Flame for about a week now. What are your thoughts on John Beecher? For fans that don't remember, he came in on waivers from Boston.
I think he's fine. He's not a world beater.
He's a 4C.
Yeah, exactly.
A capable 4C.
Yeah, he doesn't have a ton of offense to his game, but he's fast, and he does the things that he needs to. Is he replaceable? Sure, but he's also a decent 4C.
Yeah, he's a very serviceable 4C, and finally an actual centerman.
Yeah, and something that the Flames don't have organizationally, somebody with size and speed at the 4 center spot.
Yeah.
They just don't even have, they have parts of that, but they don't have that package in the organization. So it's a little bit of a relief that you can just throw that guy out there knowing what you're going to get. And, he's not going to blow you away offensively, but he's just solid.
Yeah, I like what we're seeing from him so far. And I think they found the right role for him in the organization. I think he's the right guy to fill the role they need, but they are not trying to push him up the lineup. I think, they've said, well, this guy's a very serviceable 4C, and we're happy with that.
Oh.
So 2 months into the season, I thought we'd take a minute here and talk about some of the points leaders after 2 months, who, going into this, you probably would not think that the Morgan Frost to be one of the top 5 point getters for the Flames. I know a lot of people weren't expecting him to be. I thought he'd have a good season. But as of now, Nazem Kadri sits at 21 points, 5 goals, 16 assists. Rasmus Andersson, 5 goals, 13 assists. Matt Coronado, 8 goals, 6 assists. Morgan Frost, 6 goals and 8 assists for the points leaders. And we now have Blake Coleman and Matt Coronado. I don't know why I was thinking Backlund when I looked at Coronado. Both have 8 goals, which is the most on the team. Surprisingly, still a whole bunch of guys with 0 goals. Pakal, 0. Maramanov, not surprising, 0. And Parekh, 0. Technically, Morton and Cairns as well, because they've dressed. But, again, not the huge offensive numbers, but for a team where they are, I think we're seeing what we all expected here. We're seeing scoring by committee.
Yeah, and when you have, 8 players with double digits in points at this point, nobody's blowing you away, but
no.
You have.
I'm glad to see Frost turn it around.
Yeah, and you have 3 guys that are on pace for over 20 goals with Coronado, Farabee, and Coleman. So that's at least encouraging in some respect, and yeah, it's not the prettiest set of numbers, but and the one thing that I am truly impressed by is Kevin Ball's plus 12 on a team that can't score.
Yeah, that is. I didn't know he was that high. That's interesting.
Yeah, Backlund and Coleman are 5 and 4. Lomberg is at plus 2. Hanzik at plus 1, and everybody's a 0 or worse.
Oh wow!
So,
how's Anderson looking? He was the big minus guy last year.
He's not doing too bad. He's a 0. So.
Okay, so
Mackenzie Wigger gets to wear the goat horns at minus 20 alongside Coronado at minus 18. So
Yikes. That's a big number.
Not good.
So last week, Matt, I went off on a bit of a rant, and so did you, on Don Maloney and some of the comments that we heard from him during the broadcast. I think we probably all knew that after that, a signing of Craig Conroy was imminent. At least I did. I thought after that, you kind of have to sign the guy to show you've got faith in him, and that's exactly what happened. This week, we saw that all of the senior hockey leadership staff have been re-signed now. So Don Maloney, Craig Conroy, Dave Nonis, Brad Pascal all got re-signed this week to 2-year deals.
Yeah.
So I'll be here for the same amount of time. For those that don't remember, Don Maloney, president of hockey operations, Craig Conroy was the GM, Dave Notice and Brad Pascal, both AGMs. And then you round that group out with Peter Hanlon, who got promoted there in the summer, special advisor to the general manager, Jerome McGinley, and senior director of hockey ops, Mike Burke, who are all still under contract. So are you surprised to see all of them get a deal?
No. And
I think we all knew Conroy would.
Yeah, and honestly, when you have, basically all of Flames media from all the various sources, NHL media, and like a 50-plus page post on Calgary Puck, in addition to other places, all basically going, what the F was that? With the Maloney interview. And it was basically as strong of a message to ownership and the management structure that we're absolutely 100% okay with a rebuild. Just keep going the way you are and don't sabotage yourself, please.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot. Craig Conroy is, in my view, the right guy for this. If they were to have canned Conroy, they would be moving in the wrong direction. I think it's great that he's back, and this is obviously the team that Craig built, and so if he wants his whole team here for 2 years, I have no problems with that.
Yeah, and I don't mind having, even, the subject of ire from last week, Don Maloney getting extended. Because all of the people involved have done a fairly good job thus far with the rebuild that they've been on. The prospects that they've been getting in the drafts, the young players like both Frost and Farabee now are looking like leaders for this team as we transition away from guys like Coleman and Backlund and Kadri. It helps to have all of these people involved because they are actually good at identifying talent properly. It's just, it takes time to actually turn the roster over properly.
Do you think there's a clause in Don Maloney's deal he's not allowed to do any interviews for the next 2 years?
I think that he's duct tape in the closet for the time being.
Like, as we said last week, anybody on this team, is a better talker than Maloney. Like, if you want to bring him back and you think he's that good guiding force, why not? But yeah, let's not have him do an interview again.
Yeah, and it's perfectly fine that all happened because it also gave the ability for the fan base and the local media to also give feedback to the management and ownership of that, hey, your concerns about this team and the fan base, whether or not they were going to be willing to endure a rebuild. No, we're actually A-okay with that. And, it helps to basically have everybody on the same page. And, that way that situations like the Maloney thing don't happen. Because that was a clear, somebody's not on the same page. And, being able to communicate that to ownership and management that, hey, what you doing? I think, anytime communication can be productive both ways is a good thing. And
yeah, I don't know. It was just, and again, I understood kind of what Maloney was trying to say, but he was the wrong guy to put out there. And you're right. This is a great time, I think, for management to really say, yes, the fans do have an appetite for this. And the Flames or the management does have the management does have the desire to rebuild, and so do the fans. So maybe that's the direction we need to go in.
You don't even have to look very far. You look at Chicago coming in and seeing the Connor Bedard show. You see the Sharks come in and the Macklin Celebrini show. And we've seen up north a certain team going to the Stanley Cup Finals twice in a row because in all three cases, those teams just sucked. And they got the generational player that they needed to turn their franchise around. And, it was not fun those seasons for the Oilers, for the Blackhawks, for the Sharks. But the fan bases sure as hell are stoked now.
Yep. Yeah, they sure are. It's definitely different in those markets than it was when they were bad. So I'm glad to see all these guys resign. I think they've got the right team in place. AGMs only matter so much. And if these are the guys Conroy wants to work with, great. I think it's good they're there. We see management by committee now in the NHL is a big thing. And this team obviously has a path that they want to go on. Craig Conroy, shortly afterwards, announced that he was signed, told Pat Steinberg on Fan 960 nothing has changed. I know sometimes people think because we don't actually just tell everybody what's going on, maybe something else is happening. The plan has always been we had to do it probably two ways. We're going to have to build through the draft and trades. So pretty much what Conroy has been saying since he came in, right, is it's time to rebuild. The plan hasn't changed. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and, one of the complaints is that we hadn't heard from Conroy, and, now that we have, it just helps just to make sure that, no weird, funny business is going to go on and, at leaving everybody scratching their heads going, WTF. So, and it's one of those things that, you don't need to explicitly say, oh, well, we're just going to suck. But, when you're basically saying...
Conroy pretty much said what Maloney said much better.
Yeah. And what Maloney said gave everybody the impression of, oh, we're not going to suck. We're building a winning tradition here with being in 32nd. And it's like, huh?
Yeah, and Conroy didn't make up a weird word like rebiggled like Maloney did.
Yeah. And I don't have any problem with Maloney at all. It's just that, you need to have your messaging down properly and to check in every once in a while with the fan base just to, make sure that you're doing things in a proper and sane way. And, certainly the interview from Maloney did not give the impression that the management was doing the sane thing. So it helps just to get that reassurance that no, we're fine, we got it. And
yeah, well, and know your, as the famous wrestler The Rock says, know your role. Maloney's role is not in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Like, I have no problem with him. I think he's a good hockey guy. I think he's valuable to the organization. I think, obviously he's part of Craig's team and probably a good voice for ownership, but, he should not be the guy doing interviews. And it's good that we heard from Craig. I think it calmed down a lot of fans who are worried about, is Craig Conroy on the hot seat? Is he coming back? I think it just helped to clarify things and show that, yeah, we're still going the same direction. Nothing has changed here. And I think it was also good timing to say that with, again, American Thanksgiving coming up, kind of saying, hey, we're going to rebuild through trades. And I think that's a subtle, there will be a trade at some point.
Yeah. And at least it also gives fans also something to look forward to, especially if through Christmas, like the Flames are still near the bottom, that, well, hey, we might be getting, insert draft pick here, insert prospect there.
There was something mentioned this week that I guess Craig Conroy had this deal sitting on his desk since the beginning of the year. Do you make anything of it that it didn't get done until this week?
Honestly, I am not surprised if that's the case, and it might also just be a convenient media thing of, no, we just didn't bother. Especially with the Flames start, I can understand not wanting to put it out there that, oh, hey, we just resigned everybody, we're dead last, and, let's keep these guys around. I can understand from a PR perspective that not wanting to have that, but... Yeah,
announcing it at just the right time.
And, heading into the season, you want the focus to be on the players, not necessarily the management. Like, I can understand when Huska got re-signed, just so there's not that floating question of, is he going to be re-signed? Honestly, I feel like everybody was re-signed at the same time, Huska and everybody, but, they wanting to keep the players on the ice, but with the distraction off the ice, that it's like, okay, well, in order to shut that down...
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. I don't make a lot of it. I think it was probably done, or you know what, they put it in front of Craig, and maybe he and his, there was no rush to sign it. I think it was a foregone conclusion it would get signed, whether it was then or not. I think it was, you know what, Craig, we'll put this here, sign it when you get a chance. I think, I can't see any reason why it wouldn't have been signed, or why there would have been question there with Craig Conroy. So, I guess moving on from there, the big thing we should probably talk about, or actually before let's go there. Devin Cooley. Devin Cooley looking good. He's played like 10 NHL games now, but every game this year, Devin Cooley's looked amazing and what we've seen. First question I'll ask you is, Cooley's he's 28. He's on the last year of an expiring deal. He's a UFA this year. Could you see Cooley going the Dan Vladar route, where he chooses not to come back and tries to sign somewhere where he can be a 1A, 1B?
I doubt it, because he doesn't have the pedigree. He has only played in 16 games total, 6 with the Sharks a couple of years ago, and 10 with the Flames this season. I view this as kind of like when Vladar got his first extension with the Flames, that he wasn't really proven, and, gave him some room to figure out if he is a 1A, 1B type, or just a backup, and he looks more like a 1A, 1B type. The 50-50 can start on a bad team type guy. Cooley just doesn't have that track record, so I wouldn't be surprised if he signed like a 2 or 3 year deal for like between $2.5 million, which is like standard backup cost, and go from there.
Yeah, I think he's definitely earned a job in the NHL somewhere next year. Even if he doesn't look great from here on out, I think just the work he's put in, he's going to get a job. I can't see a lot of teams lining up for Devin Cooley. Like you said, he's barely played 16 games. I think he looks good. But I think the likelihood is that he stays in Calgary. And I guess that goes to my next question. If you were Craig Conroy, would you be seeing if you could leverage him at the trade deadline as a trade piece?
No, because honestly, I don't think that you'd get anything more than like a 7th round pick for him, just because of the fact that he doesn't have a pedigree. Usually if a goalie is traded at the deadline, it's usually like the 32, 33, 34-year-old guy who's been around, like a Peter Mrazek type guy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, talk in Edmonton about them needing a better goalie. I mean, Devin Cooley's not going to solve that. And I think that if you're looking for a decent backup, I mean, I think Georgiev was available on waivers already this week. Like, those guys are out there, have been free, probably attainable at a reasonable cost.
Yeah.
And I think the Flames, I think they're going to try and re-sign Cooley. They like Cooley as a guy. The organization likes him. I think he likes it here. I think there's a good likelihood that you see Devin Cooley back as a Flame.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd be surprised if he's not. And I think that if the Flames are looking at trade chips, they have a lot of other chips that they can play. But what we've seen from Cooley so far, like, he played, let's call it 2 3/4 of a game this week. Do you think that it's still Dustin Wolf probably getting the majority of the starts, or do you almost move into a 1A, 1B, or play until you lose?
Well, with Wolf, I feel that he's been dealing with a little bit too many games, and with the condensed schedule, like, he hasn't been quite as sharp. He's still very good, but, letting in some goals that he wouldn't otherwise. The Tampa game, I think, was just an aberration, and, if Cooley hadn't won the Florida game, I think that they would have went back to Wolf today. But, it's kind of a you win, you stay in type of situation now. And I feel that, having Wolf on more of a, playing, like a 55-45, with Cooley playing the 45%, makes a little bit more sense, especially with, like, where you're playing 3-4 games every week.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And especially like December, where they've got a lot of games coming up in fairly short order. I think you'll see Cooley play at least once a week. Mm-hmm. And I think there's now more confidence if they do want to play him back-to-back, or if they've got, games where they think he can be out there. Like, he's got to be giving these guys a lot of confidence in him, especially after a bit of a disappointing training camp. I think you'll see him at least once a week. And especially with the Flames probably not running for the playoffs, I think you might see that workload change after the Olympics to give Cooley more games, just see what's there.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, you're not going to need to rely on Dustin Wolf to, take you all the way to the playoffs this year. And the interesting thing is really Dustin Wolf and Devin Cooley are making the same money this year. They're both in the mid 900,000s. So Dustin Wolf's new deal hasn't kicked in yet. These guys, it's not like Wolf is getting paid 3 times as much yet. So, I don't think you have that need as an organization to say we should be playing him 3 times as much.
Yeah.
And I could see a scenario even after, say, the Olympics where it's play till you lose.
I agree.
And I think that'd be fine for Cooley. And I think the Flames just need to give Cooley. I mean, when they got Dan Vladar, he'd really not played a lot of NHL hockey either, but they gave him enough runway to see what he could do. And I think we learned Vladar can be good. Vladar can be a little bit inconsistent at times, but we knew what we had in Dan Vladar, I would say, when he left. I don't know if you feel the same. And I think we need to at least give Devin Cooley the same chance to say, okay, what have we got here?
I agree. And like Vladar, with the Flyers, like he's become their starter, which is a little weird. And he's posted a 2.43 goals against average and 912 save percentage, which is fairly good. So, he's working out well for the Flyers, and if not for Wolf playing as well as he did last year, he might be the starter for the Flames this year. But
Well, I think when he was brought in, he was the heir apparent to Markstrom, and then obviously Wolf has come on strong, and that didn't happen. But I think that was probably kind of the internal promise that was made, was he'd be that heir apparent for Jacob Markstrom, which didn't quite happen, and that's okay. But I think if you're Devin Cooley and you stay here, you're not going to be the starter. You're not going to be even fighting for that. Like, there will be a clear 1A, 1B division. Or, let's say, starter backup, not 1A, 1B division.
Yeah, and we've seen with other goalies around the league, like Anthony Stolarz, where he bounced around a bit and then finally was able to break through as a starter last year with the Leafs. And it might end up being a similar situation where Cooley doesn't actually become a starter till he's like 30, 31, 32. But, if he continues to play like this, it gives the Flames a good problem to have.
And you know what? Some guys are just really good backups. And I think that might be Devin Cooley. Like, I don't know how he would do in a 50 start scenario.
No, me either. And it'll be interesting to see how this story develops as we go on.
I think we saw even here recently guys like David Riddick, who I think the Flames used as starter because they kind of had to, and has never really had a starter job since. And I think people realize, what his role is as a backup.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Someone needs to be the backup, and we've had good backups. We've even had guys who were good backups rise to the occasion. I mean, Fred Brathwaite is probably the example of that here in Calgary. He was a backup his whole career. He came here because we were out of goalies and looked good, and then went on and never really continued that starter role.
No.
So, Cooley could just be that and he's good, or this coaching staff's working for him, or who knows what those variables might be. But I'm not convinced that Cooley is. I mean, I heard people on Overtime with Fan 960 today with Pat Steinberg saying they signed the wrong goalie. You should give Cooley starter minutes. I'm not there yet, and I don't think I'll ever be there.
No.
Cooley's a nice addition to the team. I'm not convinced that, you put him into 55 games and he would continue the play that he has.
Well, and you've seen that in the past, like when Vladar and Markstrom were the tandem, that Vladar would get a stretch of games where he would be playing most of a month because he was just on a heater. And when he started to cool down, then Markstrom would go in and play most of the minutes, and like they'd kind of trade off. If one started to struggle a little more, and they'd balance it off. And Cooley is definitely on a heater right now. Whether that continues into December, January, February, who knows? But Wolf, I feel, is going to be the consistent starter. Just giving more playing time to Cooley than you normally would, especially if he is on this run.
Yeah, and I feel like they've overplayed Dustin Wolf at the beginning of the season, and you don't want to do that for a young player. So I think it's nice that they have a backup they have some confidence in.
Well, and that was the key. Like at the beginning of the season, I'm sure that they would have started the other goalie a couple of more times had they had the confidence in Cooley. And it was like only when they begrudgingly had to, and then they're like, oh, he actually played really well. Okay. Then go back to Wolf until he basically is ready to drop, and oh, Cooley played well again. And, and now it's, he's 10 games into the season, and it's like, oh, Cooley's actually doing really awesome. That's strange. Because for expectations, like it was kind of, I think everybody in the organization felt that this was kind of like the Kipper post-lockout years where, yes, we technically have a backup goalie.
we have to, by league rules, have a backup goaltender.
Yes. Who it is, who cares?
Yeah.
we're
the
planning
fact
to
they
lose those games anyway, so it doesn't matter.
You there with the pads.
Yeah.
McLennan is probably the only one that most people remember from that era. And I think that the fact that they've played Cooley 2 games in a row now really says something about the coaching staff and how they feel about him, and their confidence has grown in him to, go to him 2 times in a row, because usually with your backup, you're starting them the least amount you can. So like you were saying, and it's like, okay, they're believing in this guy, and they're, wanting to put him in, I would say, voluntarily. So I think, he just has to keep up this great play, and they will probably keep him in the net for a while. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily every night, but I think he will get they will look to him more often than they were planning to. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable way of looking at this. So, yeah, exciting to have him here for now. Not going to take over. I mean, we've seen a lot of guys that have looked good for 10 games, even goaltenders, and they never really became starters. So I think, look back at the history of the league, look back at some previous goalies in a similar scenario. Yeah, it's cool he's doing this, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's a bona fide starting goaltender.
No. And one quick note, just to add on to the Conroy extension. The 3 guys from the last draft, Reshny, Potter, and 5th round pick Ethan Wittenbach have been tearing up the NCAA thus far this season. Wittenbach actually leads the entire NCAA for freshmen in scoring with 22 points in 16 games, which is unreal numbers for somebody so young. Reshny has 15 in 14 games, and Potter is at 14 in 16 games. So anytime a freshman's around a point a game, that's really impressive. And what Wittenbach's doing is like eye-opening because, those are Johnny Gaudreau numbers.
Yeah, and not, from a really high pick. And even in that case, Matvei Gridin tearing up the AHL too. He's, I think, the top point getter in the AHL right now, not just for rookies, but for the whole league.
Yeah.
So, Craig Conroy's strength has always been the draft. We knew that even when he was AGM. And I think we're seeing that here again. I'm happy to hear he's back. I had no questions about it, but maybe got a little bit of doubt after that interview, but they made the right choice. Next thing to move on to is an email from our friend Al. Al writes in quite a bit. He comes to all of our live events. Al's become a good friend of the show. He says, enjoying your chat on the Maloney Gate. I think what he said and what he meant is overblown. Everyone will see by their actions, their being the team, if they're rebuilding / retooling / rebranding and make up their own mind. Biggest challenge, I think, is not what they tell the fans or the market, but what they tell the players, Al. And I think what Al's getting at is, how do you go about telling players, hey, we're about to, go into a rebuild. Whether we win or lose doesn't really matter here. Or do you do what I think Conroy has said that he did and pretty much tell all the players, you know what, guys? Yes, we might be rebuilding and bringing young players in, but we still want to keep that same culture and that winning culture. How would you deal with that if you were the GM, Matt?
Well, you have to be honest and upfront with your players, and you're basically at the third way mark of the season, and you're 31st. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, hey, we're gonna miss the playoffs probably, and some of you might want to contact your local realtor because good chance that adios. And it's about having that rapport with the players, like say Nazem Kadri, to have that conversation of do you want to go and try to win another Stanley Cup? Which team do you feel makes the most sense for both you, your family, and attaining that goal, and figuring it out and working with guys like Anderson and Coleman and all of that. And like you look at Anderson, he has a large no trade list, and he's a free agent at the end of the year, and you also have to entertain the idea of trading that player to a team that he wants to sign with, and are you going to get the best offer from that team, or just insert random other team here, and weighing what's the best interest for you and the player. And it's a hard thing to actually work through, but first and foremost, you have to be honest with both yourself and the players and go, well, reality is that, we're basically at the bottom of the standings, and, some of you are free agents and others are highly sought after pieces. Odds are we're going to get some calls for you. So.
Yeah. And I think too that while I see what you're saying about guys like Anderson and Kadri, you can also pitch this as an opportunity for some guys. You could look at guys like Frost or Farabee or, Mantha, who they brought in last year. I think that there's an opportunity for some of these guys to say, hey, yes, maybe we're in a bit of a down cycle right now, but come in, show people you can do this, look good on this team where you might not have got that opportunity on another team, especially if you're a defenseman right now. The Flames arguably have a weak defense. We've talked about this for a while. I think you could easily say, hey, you're not getting the minutes you want wherever you are. Come to Calgary and show people you can do this, because we'll give you more minutes than you're used to.
Well, and to look at a guy like Joel Farabee as an example, he has been excellent this year for the Flames and is basically playing the same game that Blake Coleman has been his entire tenure here. And that also helps the organization because of the fact that that if you do decide to move on from Coleman, that you have a guy who's actually showing up and playing that way, that you can rely on that player to take those minutes if and when Coleman gets dealt, without, suffering a catastrophic, like, oh, we don't have anybody who can play defense up front anymore.
And I think even a guy like, an Adam Klapka, right, who, may not get an opportunity in a regular fourth line role on another organization, Calgary might look attractive from that respect.
Yeah, and there are always guys looking to bounce back.
Like Mantha last year.
Yeah, or Shane Goss to spare after he left the Flyers, because he struggled mightily there, and then rebuilt his value and is back to being paid what he was. And, and like there are always going to be players that are needing a second chance, and especially when it comes time for free agency, like Flames still need to hit the cap floor one way or the other. So, hey, do you want to play first line minutes on a team that's, up and coming and might actually have some talent down the road to pair with you, and you can kind of be that next generation leader guy? Or, do you want to be a spare part on a team that's in the middle?
Exactly, and I think even guys like Frost and Farabee, they came from a Philadelphia system that wasn't working for them. They come to Calgary. You're not signing these guys to 7-8 year deals. Even if they're here for 2 years to sort of, rehab their image, and then you trade them off, there was still value to both sides from that exchange.
Oh, for sure. And like the Flames, in both of their cases, they get a top 6 center and a top 6 winger that they can plug and play for the next couple of years while they, have players develop in the AHL and juniors. And, with how each of them's playing at the trade deadline, like if they were free agents to be, they would probably get you a first round pick each with how they're playing. So in 2 or 3 years, if the Flames decide to move on from them, because, their prospect pool is amazing, then, they can do that without, and get more assets to, further the rebuilding, retooling effort.
And I think these are the worst years of the rebuild, the ones kind of before the big piece comes in. But once that big piece comes in, like you're seeing with Celebrini in San Jose, I think that's a big reason why a guy like Toffoli, a veteran who's very experienced, went there too, because you're going to look a whole lot better if you're on to, that line. And I think there's a lot of guys that might, once Calgary gets that piece, want to come here to, wow, I can get my numbers up if I play with that guy.
Yeah, and you look at, for example, the Flames, how they're doing their prospect pool. Like, they've got lots of guys that are profiling to be like good second liners, good third liners, good defensemen, that are the pieces that you need to actually build a cup contending team. You can't just rely on the McDavid and Draisaitl show. Like, you actually need the rest of your team in order to push you over that hump. And having all of those guys in the system already and, on their way to becoming NHLers will help once you do get the 2 or 3 high-end picks that will be coming, because it's not going to be a quick procedure, that, you can plug and play like your Monahans and Kachucks and your Bennetts when you have, all of your secondary guys already in the system and in the NHL or knocking on the door. So It certainly helps how they're doing it, and it's very much reminding me of how Chicago turned their system around by getting the guys like Boland, Bufflin, and all of that.
Oh, back in the day. I was just saying, they haven't really turned it around right now.
Years in advance of them getting, airlifting Taves and Kane in. Like, they already had basically the entire Blackhawks Cup winning team except those 2 guys. Once they drafted them, they could just plug everybody in and, oh, hey, we're, basically an all-star team. Yay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the Flames are basically following that model of getting all of the secondary guys, so that way they can just plug and play, insert top 3 pick here, and, hope for some draft luck and all of that fun too.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Al, and I think that the Flames have to definitely, be honest and say, hey, we are rebuilding. If you don't want to be here, even if you've got a no trade, we'll find a way to get you out of here. You don't want guys who don't want to be here, but I think everybody in that room knew coming into this season what this season was going to be.
Yeah. It's hard not to, especially with them not really adding anything after being 1 point away from being a playoff team a year ago. The writing was kind of on the wall that, they're just basically counting down until this team is, dwindling towards, the bottom and then, pulling the cord. And, it seems like this team is getting ever closer to that cord being pulled.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone knew where they were going to be with this. I think everyone knew exactly what it was. And the guys that are here, for the most part, I think want to be here for various reasons. I think whether they want to be here long term or they just want to have the best season they can to show their worth on the market. I think that, everyone the Flames have already got rid of those guys that didn't want to be here.
Yeah, and that happened a couple of years ago. And we, subsequently moved guys like Mangiapane and Markstrom, who are also kind of in that same-ish group, and yeah.
And like Al said, I think the actions the Flames take the rest of the season will show who they think they are, right? Not what they say, but are they willing to make some of those veteran moves? What do they do this year will show their actions.
Yeah.
Let's look ahead to December. The Flames in December have 13 games, and usually December is not a busy month, but these guys don't get much of a Christmas break. They've got 13 games primarily at home. They've been on the road a lot, so they're back home. They only have 4 games on the road. They start the season Tuesday on the road against Nashville. Then they're home for 4 games, Minnesota, the Mammoth, the Sabres, and Detroit. Then they go on the road for LA and then a 2-game break for San Jose. Then they've got the Kraken and the Golden Knights here at home again. Then they only have 1 game from the 20th to the 26th, and it's a road game in Edmonton. So not a bad road trip if you're a Flames player.
Yeah,
you'll be back in your bed for Christmas.
From the 17th through the 31st, they're in Calgary or Edmonton.
Yeah.
Actually, all the way through till January 6th, they're in either of those 2 places. So, more or less like a very extended homestand.
Yeah, I mean, the 23rd against Edmonton, you can be home that night if you want to, be back in your own bed. So, not a bad month for the Flames. I think that the home games might help them out. Not a bad schedule either. If you look at the teams they're playing. I mean, Nashville's up next. They're not good. Buffalo's not good. San Jose's, is okay. Edmonton's having goalie issues right now. The Flyers are not great. Like, this might be, I think, if there's a month so far that we've said the Flames could make some traction, this is probably it.
Yeah, and that's why, earlier I said that, for them to get back into it, they need to be 9-4. It's doable. It's just that they're going to have to be consistently good if they're wanting to basically still be alive after the end of 2025.
Yeah, it's a lot of hockey, but it's not a lot of travel. I think that's been one of the Flames' big issues so far is travel. They're pretty much here all month, and even the road trips are not bad. Like San Jose, LA, not a bad road trip from here. It's not like you're going from Vancouver to, Tampa Bay like they just did.
Yeah, and even then, they have 2 days of travel, then they play LA, then 2 more days of travel before playing San Jose, and then they're here again. So, plenty of rest in between the travel days.
Yeah, if they're not doing well this month, you can't blame it on the schedule.
No.
Do you think it's reasonable the Flames go 500 on the month, which means they win half their games?
With the quality of their opponents, frankly, they should. there's at least 6 games where like the Flames are basically equivalent to their opponent. So it just comes down to hard work on that, which the Flames over the last month have shown that they can do that. And the games against the better teams, they just have to show up. And
I think this is a month where you're going to have to work hard. If you take your foot off the gas, even against the bad teams, you could easily lose any of these games. But if the Flames can keep being the hard-working Flames team we've seen in November, I think the success will find them this month.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fortune cookie.
Yeah. Well, 7 of the 13 games are against tough opponents. 6 are against easy ones. So, they should be able to split the difference and go 6-1 between it all. If they want to actually, make some forward progress towards being a playoff team instead of in the basement, they need to go at least 9-4, preferably 10-3, which is a tall order. But
I don't think you get anywhere near that in December.
No. So
you have too many good teams.
Yeah, and that's very likely. But, that's kind of the goal if you're wanting to get back into it at all and be like, hey, I still am alive. Not dead yet.
Well, speaking of not being dead, I'm not dead in our predictions game from last week. I finally got a win. You got a win earlier this season on the second week of the season, October 12th. I got the win last week predicting they'd beat Florida and lose to Tampa Bay and Carolina. Either they lose all 3 of them. This week we have 3 games to predict. We have the Tuesday game in Nashville, a 6 p.m. start time. Then back to our normal start time on Thursday of 7 p.m. And then Saturday in Calgary, a 5 p.m. start time. I can't remember the last time I saw 5 p.m. in Calgary with 2 Western teams. That's weird.
Yeah.
But an early game there. What are your thoughts on this week, Matt?
I think they bookend the week with wins and they lose the one in the middle.
So you think they win Nashville and Utah?
I would have said that Utah would be a loss, but Cooley's going to be out for a while. Logan Cooley, not Devin.
Not the one we just talked about.
Yeah. The other Cooley, he got a knee right to his thigh in a really bad Charlie horse, so that's probably going to take like 2 weeks just to get, able to skate properly again, because that was a really bad knee on thigh.
Logan Cooley has been carrying that team.
Yeah.
This is a week I think the Flames could win all 3.
Same
I
here.
think all 3 are winnable games for this team if we see them play the way that they did for the last 2 games this week. But I'm not convinced the Flames are going to be able to put that kind of consistency into this.
Yep. And, just as easily they could fall on their face again. So it's hard to tell with this team, so we'll see.
I'm going to say they have to beat Nashville. The only team worse than them they have to be able to beat, right?
Well, they already lost to them, so...
They did.
What's another one?
But they lost to them when they still weren't back in the groove.
True.
Right? I mean, they played them November 1st and now December 2nd. I don't know. They weren't as good then as they are now. I feel like they were still getting over their crappy October. I'm going to say they beat Nashville. The other 2 I'm conflicted. All right. I'll say they win all 3. I'll go crazy this week. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll try to counterbalance your usual prediction of lose 3.
Okay.
You're probably going to win this week. Yeah, I'll say they win all 3. I think the Flames can do it. And looking ahead, this is the only week of the season or the month I think they can do it.
Yeah.
If it's going to happen, this is the week to make that prediction. I guess, is the question for this coming week, when do you play Wolf or when do you play Cooley? I think Wolf is back in net for the Nashville game. I think if Cooley would have got the shutout win, maybe you'd put him back in, but I think that you will see Wolf back in net for Nashville. Do you agree?
Yeah. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Wolf was in all 3.
I think they need to get Wolf going again. I could see him being for all three and then put Cooley in again for Buffalo.
Yeah, that would be the way I'd play it too.
Or even Detroit.
I'd probably put Buffalo just so that way, Cooley gets a little bit of action, and because there's a long break after the Detroit game, where
2
they're
days.
only playing 2 games in a week.
Yeah.
So
I just think the Buffalo saw Cooley last time, and you might want to give them a different look.
True.
That's why I'm thinking maybe Detroit. Like, give Buffalo a different look for the second game, and then play Cooley, Detroit, and then maybe San Jose. But we'll deal with those weeks when we get there. But, yeah, I'm thinking this is a week of 3 Dustin Wolf starts. I think they need to get him going again.
Yeah. It was good to give him a break. Now get back to work.
Get back to work. Get back home. Dustin, finish off the road trip and get back home, and then we'll figure out the starts from there.
Yeah.
With 2 games against Edmonton later in the month, I could see Cooley getting one of those again just to give him different looks. I think that there's at least one game every week you could feasibly throw Cooley into this month.
I agree.
All right, Matt. Well, let's hope I'm right. Let's hope we get 3 wins and the Flames get some points that they need here. And I will talk to you next week, and we'll see if I'm right.
And as always, go Flames, go.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.